And if you think about marketing, right, for a consumer brand, what better brand to collaborate with other than
Yeah.
Bitcoin, right? So imagine that you go to supermarkets. If I buy DDC products, I can actually
Yeah.
earn Bitcoin-based rewards. That's going to be potentially disruptive to the consumer sector.
I'm your host, Megs, and you're listening to Megs Splaining, where I bring on interesting guests to talk about tech, money, and power shifts. Welcome to Megs Splaining. Today, I have Norma Chu, the CEO and founder of DDC Enterprise. Welcome.
Hey, Max. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think it's really neat because you have built DDC, DayDayCook, from a content company, everybody's a content creator these days, to a multi-brand consumer food company. And you have undergone this massive transformational pivot this year where you're blending the roots of this multi-Asian consumer food company with this aggressive Bitcoin treasury strategy. So congratulations, first of all. That's quite the transformation.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's been a very interesting year for sure. Yeah, so I started, DDC about 13 years ago, and back then, not everybody was a content creator yet, but we started out as a content company. We're doing a lot of short form videos and also building a community around it. And over the years, the business kind of, expanded from content to content commerce, selling products within our videos and live streaming. And then right before the pandemic, a few years ago, we launched our own branded food business. So yeah, underneath, the newly adopted Bitcoin Treasury strategy, you'll see a growing, profitable food business at DDC.
When did you first decide that Bitcoin should be part of DDC strategy? Like, what was the catalyst?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I mean, last year, one of my very early investor, and he's been investing in DDC for close to a decade now, and he himself is a Bitcoiner since the early days. And so, we catch up from time to time. And last year, around late summer, I remember, sitting at a Blue Bottle coffee shop and we are catching up. And I was super excited to tell him that we we're about to enter into another potential acquisition that we're looking at because acquisition or acquiring for growth has been part of our strategy since before and after the IPO. But then, he kind of pointed me to this direction. He's like, Norma, think outside of the box, outside of just other than just acquiring traditional businesses, maybe I should consider acquiring digital assets on the listed platform of DDC. And so he kind of pointed me down this, orange rabbit hole of the strategy playbook, if you will. And obviously, I think as a business operator, the choice for Bitcoin is clear. I've mentioned this before as a ex-equity research analyst. A couple of things that really stands out for me for Bitcoin. And it really is the best and only store of value amongst all the digital assets. Number one, scarcity, consistently outperforming all asset class for, the past decade. I mean, that type of track record, we can definitely take on as a business owner to help us carry on this appreciating assets on our balance sheet to kind of be more defensive against the high amount of inflation that we've been seeing in recent years. So yeah, I'm very fortunate until this day. I always thank this particular investor for pointing me to this direction.
Can you walk us through DDC's strategic plan? And also, you have a recent announcement.
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to continue to stay focused and be consistent with our Bitcoin stacking. I mean, we recently just announced this strategy in May. I remember I was in Vegas at the Bitcoin conference, and it was like kind of like the perfect stage for us to announce and share with the investment community that we're taking on this Bitcoin Treasury as part of the corporate strategy going forward. And one of the first milestone was for the team to acquire 1,000 Bitcoin within the first 100 days. And so we were able to accomplish that a few weeks ago. And so I think right now the near term is to continue to stack. And we do have a very aggressive target of 10,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. And I think the North Star for DDC is really, we want to be disciplined and focused and also be relevant within this category. So our goal, within the next 3 years is ideally to be the top 3 global Bitcoin treasury company in the world.
Since you announced, becoming a treasury strategy, there's been so many other companies that have formed. Most of them, I think, are pure play Bitcoin treasury companies. So what differentiates your company from these? And is it a distraction to have another line of business, or is it an advantage?
Yeah, I think is a good foundation for a company listed and private to kind of have an operating. I mean, the key is to have a growing, profitable operating business. And then on top of that, we add the Bitcoin treasury strategy. So I wouldn't look at it as a distraction. In fact, I think it's a good foundation for any company to have that, where, your underlying business generates healthy cash flow and generates net profit. And on top of it, you can use the listing status to raise capital, get additional capital just for Bitcoin accumulation. And I think what separates DDC from other Bitcoin treasury companies out there maybe boil down to three things, right? Number one is what we just mentioned, having a growing operating business, a growing profitable operating business. The second thing is probably our access and root in the Chinese and also Asian markets. I started the business 13 years ago out of Hong Kong, and I've been running the operating business in mainland China for the past decade. We obviously have very good investor relations and just a really good network around us. And I think having different access to capital is probably important as part of the playbook for the flywheel to continue, because obviously it requires the management team to have the ability to continue to go to market, raise capital that is efficient for us to continue stacking. So I think having this access to Chinese and Asian investor and also investor interest is really important for DDC. Finally, I would say having management continuity is also another differentiating factor. I mean, we've done M&As before, and I think M&As or some of the other pure play Bitcoin treasury companies where a new group of management team are injected into a shell company. And then eventually there's going to be overlapping period, but then over time, maybe the existing business will then get spin off. But I think that integration in itself is going to be very that could be distracting, actually. That could be very challenging, right? I mean, because we are talking about a blend of culture, a blend of people under the same operating listed entity. And where, for DDC, I've been with the company for day one, and you definitely see me as the kind of the leader that will give the company continuity in both culture and also a management style that I think will be relevant as we go through different cycles of this sector.
I'd love to dive a little deeper into that unique advantages that you have because you have proximity to China. The Asian market is quite familiar with your brand. Is that provide advantages for capital raising in terms of deep connections compared to some of the other treasury companies, which a lot of them are North American, so maybe they're looking from the same types of capital pools there?
Yeah. Well, first, we're domiciled in Cayman Islands and listed in the US, and then we have an operating business in mainland China. But I think it gives us advantages in two angles. Number one is having built this, um, I would say, content focused and community centric business of DDC back in the past decade has really given us some advantages and know how in terms of community building and also creating a healthy community around DDC. And we see similarities, right? Because I think Bitcoin in itself is also a very community focused space. And so when we kind of, dive right into this sector, having that know-how of how to create this investor awareness and also community is an advantage for DDC. Second, yeah, we've been operating in mainland China and Hong Kong for a long time, and we do have good, investor relations and access to capital here in this part of the world. So I think, yeah, being in this market for some time, and having good investor network. And I've always been very fortunate where I'm surrounded by really helpful like board members, advisors, and they always help me open a lot of doors. And so I think that also helped DDC when we think about our fundraising, when we think about access to capital markets, what type of investor we want to bring into our cap table. I think having a variety of different investors definitely helps.
I love that you talked about community. What other intersections do you think there are between your food business and Bitcoin? Is there other collaborations or ways to expand and
Yeah.
capitalize on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of my passion for food. When I first started DDC 13 years ago, it's like, cooking is always very therapeutic and it's just a lovely thing to do. And now we put food and Bitcoin together. So it's even better. But this question, I think when I was contemplating and really studying the Sailor playbook last year, I took a couple months to really think about this question. When I envision DDC having a growing Bitcoin stack on our balance sheet, how would that interact or benefit the underlying operating business, right? Because that will be the most perfect scenario where we have a growing balance sheet with an appreciating asset. At the same time, it benefits the underlying operating business. And I think it's an evolving, ongoing conversation that have and I have with the board. But essentially it came down to two ideas I think is rather actionable and it can be realized in the near term. The first one is potentially rolling out like a Bitcoin-backed reward system. I think it might be really interesting for a consumer brand. And we're seeing that right becoming more and more, I think, common and hopefully more popular in the U.S. We see Bitcoin-based reward credit cards, so consumers are going to be interacting with Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis. And if you think about marketing, right? If we think about marketing for a consumer brand, what better brand to collaborate with other than Bitcoin, right? So imagine that you go to supermarkets, you're like, I can buy all these products, but hey, if I buy DDC products, I can actually earn Bitcoin-based rewards. That's pretty cool. I think that particular idea actually got my two independent directors really excited because they are, consumer sector veterans, ex CEO of PepsiCo China, ex CEO of Gorillas. So they are consumer people. And then when they thought about, oh, that would be a really cool idea, because if you look at a lot of the consumer brands, in particular food business, one of the major expense item in the P&L that really kills net profit or really hinders profitability is really sales and marketing. So imagine if we can have something like a Bitcoin reward system to mobilize our millions of consumer, that's going to be very interesting and potentially disruptive to the consumer sector. Second thing I think is just having a lot of Bitcoin on your balance sheet. If done well and executed well, your share price and market cap should re-rate over time, right? And I think that's oftentimes the most interesting and valuable assets, right? As a listed company is our tradable currency. So imagine that, DDC shares become more and more valuable, more and more liquid. We can do a lot with the shares, right? We can acquire other profitable, growing, cash flow generating businesses to roll up into the DDC platform. So essentially, we can do a lot of M&A in a very cheap and efficient manner. So I think that those two ideas, after talking to Bitcoin experts and also consumer friends in the consumer space, I think these two ideas are really interesting, and we'll definitely be hopefully capitalizing on these two fronts very soon.
Yeah, look at Steak and Shake, right? They really embrace Bitcoin, and I think I just saw recently their sales went up by 25% since the
Yeah.
last time they reported. Yeah,
Yes.
because Bitcoiners are piling in, right? Like the first companies that really start to embrace it, we take under our wing and we want them to succeed.
Yeah. And I see a lot, right? I think Walmart is maybe accepting, I think, Bitcoin as a payment soon, and that's a huge win if that rolls
Yeah.
out in the US. I saw another post the other day. I think it's Chanel. I think one of the store or one of the geographic region that they operate in could be also taking also taking Bitcoin as payment. So yeah, I think it's here.
As an advisor to DDC, I have another idea that I would like to pitch.
Yes, let's hear it.
Here we go. So this is another intersection. Miners exude heat, and there's a lot of heating, like low grade heat when it comes to food production. I mean, you can make your operations more efficient, but wait, there's more. This is actually really neat because there are companies out there that are drying mangoes, they're drying cocoa beans. My favorite story is in Africa. They're heating the cocoa beans and drying them, and they're retaining all the value. Instead of sending the cocoa beans, they're making the chocolate locally instead of sending them to Belgium or France. like
Mhm.
pennies on the dollar for just the beans. So these are powerful stories, but like the drying actually
Yeah,
works.
amazing.
I've seen jerky. Yeah, but one more thing. So I actually tried drying my own mushrooms, like chanterelle and bullets last year. But I was using Big Miner, and very important thing that I learned was that once they get dried,
Yeah.
they get really light. So half of them ended up on the floor because the miners are so
Oh my
powerful.
god, because the wind blew them away. Yes, they are very light when they're dry.
Anyway, some jokes, but there are legitimate business models that I've seen. There's whiskey and beer distilleries that are using minor heat. So I think it's just really neat.
Like that, I like that. We can continue this idea in another session. I like that idea.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So you were talking about M&As right before that. How does having a treasury approach change how you think about, M&As in the food space? How do you balance holding or buying versus reinvesting back into the food business?
Yeah. Well, I think for the operating business, it generates enough cash flow that it kind of continue to reinvest itself. But then for the new capital that we raise, then those are 100% focused on Bitcoin acquisition. But then in terms of the way that we think about M&A, I think it hasn't changed. In fact, I think it makes our M&A story and our M&A pitch to potential partners that much more interesting. And in fact, we do have a very healthy growing pipeline of different M&A targets that we can select from in mainland China market and also in the US. We actually get pitched a lot for potential acquisition ideas. And it's wonderful because like I mentioned, because now we have Bitcoin on our balance sheets and so far the shares have been performing quite well. And imagine, if you are a food operator, you own your food brand, you've been generating profits, but you're not listed yet. However, maybe listing could be one of the exit that you're looking for. Instead of going through that process or waiting to go through that process, you can partner with DDC and you can be part of the listed vehicle. On top of that, you also get exposure to a growing Bitcoin balance sheet. So I think that in itself is extremely, extremely attractive to a lot of the partners that we talk to. So I don't think it changed our M&A approach. In fact, it kind of turbocharged it
Are these companies coming more from Asia or just all over?
all over, but mostly like China, we have a lot of potential targets. Also in the US, yeah, we see a lot of opportunities in both markets.
Cool. So the world is so different in 2025, right? There's so many geopolitical tensions and tariffs, and risks that come from it. How have these affected your company?
Yeah, I mean, tariffs definitely have an impact on our business, especially in the US side, because some of our ingredients and our finished products were imported from all over Asia. So, this year we did decide, and we announced that during our first half results announcement that we paused the US operations because we wanted to have more clarity and we have to have a more clear path to profitability for this US unit before we resume. Main thing for the Bitcoin Treasury company to have a positive flywheel effect is that operating the business cannot be draining cash. Yeah, so we're extremely cautious and it was a strategic decision to do that. But I think Hong Kong has actually been doing quite well in 2025. If you look at 2024 was a very fairly soft market, like in terms of IPO and capital inflows for Hong Kong. But if you look at first half of this year, the Hong Kong IPO market actually, I think, completed like 42 or 43 main board IPOs. They raised like 14 billion US dollars, around 7 times the amount that they did last year. And so I think the capital markets is definitely picking up. There's a lot of mainland Chinese companies seeking to list in the Hong Kong market, and then capital outflow has been challenging for Hong Kong. But then, also says once again in the second quarter of this year, Hong Kong actually saw record high capital inflow to the market, somewhere around 15, 16 billion US dollars. So, which is also indicating there's a lot of strong investor appetite for the market. All in all, it's good for DDC. Even though we're not listed in Hong Kong, we do have ongoing investor communication and interest from investors based out of Hong Kong. So seeing Hong Kong come back, right, and having this more vibrant financial market is definitely a positive.
So then looking ahead 5 or 10 years, do you expect Hong Kong and China to sort of lead or lag the West when it comes to tech or food or finance?
I think, Hong Kong is a great hub for a lot of foreign investment. And I think the government is also promoting a lot of Web3 development. The government in Hong Kong definitely wants it to be like a hub for innovation and Web3 development going forward. So there's a lot of opportunities there. I think being in the US market, especially for DDC to be listed in the US market, it is the best capital market in the world. There's so much innovation, there's so much development happening here. I think it's amazing. And DDC, once again, is very blessed in the sense that we have the Asian access, we have the Asian roots, but also being listed in the US is almost perfectly positions us to build, one of the most influential Bitcoin companies in the world because we have this positioning, right? Listing in the best capital market in the world, but also have additional access to a wide variety of different investors.
I was recently reading that NASDAQ tightened rules requiring shareholder approval for some companies that are raising funds to buy crypto assets. So, how might these restrictions make it harder for NASDAQ firms to scale their treasuries versus the potentially more flexible New York Stock Exchange, which is where you are listed?
Yeah, we are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, so we haven't been directly affected. I think is fair and it's understandable to see some tightenings from exchanges around this space because it's so new, right? I think in order to kind of prevent potential bad actors in this space, it's always good to have regulation, to have more clear framework. But I think at the end, it'll just come down to like balancing between the right amount of regulations, but also giving enough room for companies like DDC and other DATs to continue to grow, right? Because it's important to have a good framework that supports healthy ongoing capital raise for all the digital assets company, treasury companies to grow together.
Yeah. Some of the critics have been talking about the digital asset treasury sector softening. Some companies are either issuing discounted equity or they're approaching NAV or are diving below NAV. How would you address those people that are losing conviction?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible 6 months, and I saw the market being very excited in May and June, right around we launched. And then we saw a lot of really significant and notable MNAV pullback in August. And I think now in October, Bitcoin hitting all-time high. I think the sentiment is returning. I think in general, like, digital assets treasury market softening a couple months ago, it shouldn't surprise anyone who has been in the capital markets long enough, right? I mean, sentiments comes and go, especially when we see so much excitement in such a short period of time. We're going to see some pullback, right? And so I think markets can be fickle, but as an operator, when we're running a business, especially when a listed company, we just can't be swayed by these sentiments, right? We have to, I think a lot of times we just have to stay in the stone, stay focused, and continue to run and execute on our long-term strategy. So, during that time, we just stay focused and we consistently execute it and continue to accumulate throughout August. And I think it's hard to comment or change those conviction. I think it's natural. I think it's natural to for investors to be super excited, take a step back and say, okay, maybe now let's take a look. Is there different ways or are there better ways to evaluate and put together valuation models for all these new digital assets treasury models, right? Business models, which is fair. And I think it's a necessary process because all the investors now take a more rational approach and everyone's continue to improve on their valuation methodology. All these things are important foundation for the entire space to grow. So we can have more multi-billion dollar companies built based on all these assets treasury strategy. So I think, whenever these sentiments come and go, myself as the CEO and also to the management team, it's always important to just pull back the lens a little bit, right? Zoom out and remind ourselves we have the conviction in Bitcoin, right? And that conviction is not because, oh, I believe it's going to win in the next 2 months. It's like, okay, no, we're believing in this going to win in the next 2 decades and more decades to come. So, when you look at all these bigger picture, all these up and down, we might feel like, oh my God, these are big pullback. But if you zoom out, these are just, natural fluctuations. during a much wider and longer sustainable long-term uptrend. So yeah, I would just zoom out, and it's normal to, hit the reset button and put on the more rational glasses and to assess all these different companies and investment opportunities. But it's important just to remind ourselves, why are we doing this? What is our conviction? And just continue to execute.
That's a very logical and rational response. Thank you. I do feel that your story is much more representative of the public companies in the future coming towards Bitcoin, like a base business that then decides to hold Bitcoin, right? What's the most important thing that leadership of that type of company should think about?
I think is the first one is just dive right into fully equip yourself in terms of your own conviction in the strategy itself, right? Because you're going to be the key person to win all the stakeholders and all the partners that you will need to make sure that this strategy works going forward. And that starts from yourself, and then to your board members, and then to your existing and potential new investors. And then that list goes on to all your potential partners down the road as you take on this, Bitcoin treasury strategy as your corporate growth strategy for the next, decades to come. So I think just, have a very open mind, learn a lot and keep learning because this space is evolving so quickly. But yeah, having that strong conviction yourself and be able to articulate it and win over the support of your key stakeholders, probably one of the most important first steps, I think.
I love it. So a fun question for closing. I
Sure.
know that you recently visited Africa. Do you have any cool wildlife or food stories you'd like to share?
My God, I love that turn. I love that turn to my safari trip. My gosh, I had the best time in the safari, and in terms of cool wildlife stories, I mean, I was very fortunate. We were at the Maasai, and we saw almost everything that I wanted to see. And the funniest thing is that one of my friend in Kenya, he asked me, he's like, Norma, what is the animal, what wildlife or which animal you really want to see when you go to the safari? And, I took my mom and my sister with me. And so my mom was like, I want to see the leopard. My sister's like, I want to see the rhino. And I'm like, I want to see this little bird. And apparently that is the Kenya's national bird. It's like the most beautiful little bird you ever see. It's so tiny and it has beautiful rainbow color feathers. And there you go.
Yeah.
It's like the national bird for Kenya. But yeah, my friend is like, you're the only person that answered that question with, I want to see a little bird in the safari. But yeah, I got to see the little bird. I took some really cool photos.
That's awesome. I really wanted to see an elephant and I did.
Oh
So I
my
was
gosh,
quite
they're
happy. But I did,
everywhere. They're
yeah, I know.
everywhere.
Okay. The craziest thing, I was only there for a 2 day safari, but the animals are literally ever. It's like Pokemon Go. Sometimes you're just standing there and you see lions walking through a crowd of giraffes, and then there's zebras and wildebeest, and you don't think that they would just all be right there. It's
They'll
just
just
so
all
incredible.
hang out. Yes.
And then sometimes there's nothing.
Yep. You drive around for hours. You don't see a thing except a lot
Yeah.
of birds.
Yeah. Actually, I did want to see one thing and I didn't. I wanted to see a dung beetle.
Oh my gosh. Well, now you got to go back. You
I
got
gotta
to
go
make
back.
it your
There we
mission to
go.
go back. Yes.
I don't want to end the interview on a dung beetle though.
Maybe next time we go together. Next year we can make a trip together with
Go.
all the
No,
advisors.
okay. Okay. Professional ending question. Looking 12 months ahead, what are the three most important milestones you want investors to judge you on?
My gosh, 12 months ahead, three things. Well,
Okay.
I think number one is continue to have a growing, profitable underlying business because that is the foundation. So that remains intact. Second, continue to grow up Bitcoin stack and continue to grow up Bitcoin stack. And the third one, I think, obviously, I think the share price and market cap will be one of the key assessment for investors when they invest in DDC. So hopefully we continue on this path, continue to execute and continue to create more shareholder value for our investors.
Perfect. Thank you, Norma. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on X. My handle is DDC Norma.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meg's Planning. Make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. And if you turn on the notifications, Or if you leave a positive review, it can really help my show reach new listeners. This show is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always DYOR. Do your own research. Catch you next time.